Okay, think about this for a second. Imagine a ripe plum, dark, sweet, maybe a tiny bit acidic. You can almost smell it, right? Now, what if you could smell their exact scent perfectly clearly, but the plum was like thousands of miles away, maybe even sealed up somewhere, no air connecting you to it? Sounds pretty sci-fi, but that's basically what's being called scent teleportation. And it's the big claim from Osmo, this US startup that actually came out of Google researchers' work on smell. So let's dive into this.
Yeah, that's exactly what we need to unpack today. We're going to try and look past the sort of flashy headlines and really dig into the science. How Osmo says they've actually, well, digitized our sense of smell. And this isn't just, recording a chemical smell. It's apparently about building a system, teaching machines to really understand, then encode, and finally reproduce smell remotely, like human smell.
And the way our sources talk about it, they give it some serious weight. They're calling this move digitizing smell the most profound sensory leap since sound and vision went digital. Which, when you hear that, you kind of have to pause, right? Why smell? Why now? Why is it suddenly up there with sight and sound going digital? That's what we need to figure out for you. Okay, so let's lay the groundwork first. Osmo, it's an American company, a startup, but it didn't just pop up out of nowhere. It spun out of Google research, specifically their olfaction project. So there's years of pretty dedicated R&D behind it, focused just on smell perception.
Right. And it's really important to grasp why smell is just so much harder to digitize than, say, sight or sound. I
Oh,
mean, think about it. Sight and sound, they work with waves,
right.
light waves, sound waves, relatively easy, well, easier to measure and turn into digital stuff like pixels or MP3s. But smell is physical. It's molecules, actual bits of matter flying through the air, hitting hundreds of different receptor types in your nose. It's inherently complex, physical.
Hmm.
So the big challenge, the thing Osmo claims they've cracked, is taking this super complex, physical, three-dimensional molecular thing
Mhm.
and turning it into a standard digital format, something
Yeah.
you can send and execute somewhere else.
Which brings us neatly to that term, scent teleportation. When the source material uses that phrase, they're not talking about like beaming the actual plum across the world. They mean
Yeah.
the whole process, right? Capture the smell profile, encode it somehow into data, and then reproduce that exact smell experience somewhere else entirely, breaking that physical link.
Exactly. Breaking the need for the source in the sense of your nose to be connected by the same air.
But how? How do you even start to make a file that represents something as complex as a smell? The mechanism they talk about sounds like a real combination of things: AI, chemistry, and something called molecular printing.
Yes, exactly. And that combination, that synergy, that's really the key insight here, I think. The AI part isn't just like counting molecules. Its job is what they call computational olfaction. It's building a model that predicts how we, as humans, perceive a smell. Because let's face it, what smells good or bad or like a plum is pretty subjective. It depends on how all those different molecules hit our specific set of receptors. So the AI learns this mapping. It crunches through huge libraries of chemical data and figures out how the objective chemistry relates to the subjective human experience.
Okay, so the AI handles the perception part. What about the chemistry?
Well, the chemistry is the groundwork. You have to analyze the original scent. Let's stick with the plum. You need to know exactly which volatile organic compounds, the VOCs, make up that specific plum aroma. And not just which ones, but their concentrations, the whole blend.
Right, so AI gets the perception blueprint, chemistry lists the ingredients. Where does molecular printing fit in? What does that actually do on the other end?
Molecular printing, that's the output stage, the physical creation part.
Hmm.
Think of it maybe like a super, super precise 3D printer, but for smells. Once that digital smell file arrives,
Mhm.
sent over the internet or whatever, the molecular printer gets to work. It selectively releases tiny, very accurate amounts of those specific VOCs that the blueprint called for. It basically reconstructs the aroma profile right there, where you are in real time. It translates that digital code back into a localized, physical, molecular experience for your nose.
Wow, okay. That is sophisticated. It feels fundamentally different from, say, mixing essential oils or perfumes.
Totally different. It's not about mixing pre-made fragrances. It's about reconstructing from a digital recipe,
Yeah.
almost molecule by molecule, based on the AI's understanding of perception.
Let's go back to that plum example again, because it makes it feel more real. You're smelling this remote plum. What's striking about the purity of that experience, according to the sources?
Yeah, and the sources make a point of this. They say what you smell is just the pure scent recreated by AI. There's no actual plum there, obviously. And maybe even more importantly, there's no air that has traveled from the original plum. The air you're breathing is just your local air, acting as the medium for the molecular printer to release these synthesized compounds into. It really drives home the idea that the smell itself has been, well, indexed, maybe compressed, transmitted digitally, and then rendered, just like streaming audio or video.
Okay, but that brings up a tricky point. Subjectivity. We know smell is personal, right? My ripe plum might be slightly different from yours. How does a system based on decoding chemistry account for that variation? Does my digital plum smell the same as yours?
That's a really good question, and probably the toughest part. It's where that AI perception mapping becomes absolutely crucial. Osmo's system isn't trying to recreate your specific, unique plum experience perfectly. That might be impossible. Instead, it aims to create a highly accurate, reproducible standard based on, let's say, an average or indexed human perception. So if the AI knows that chemical X at concentration Y generally triggers receptor Z in most people in the way they associate with plumminess, it prints that combination to hit that target. The smell file is designed to hit the common perceptual and maybe even emotional targets. So it should be a reliable experience for most people, even if it's not 100% identical to how each individual might perceive the real thing.
So it's aiming for a kind of high-fidelity average.
You could put it that way, yeah. A very high-fidelity, computationally derived average. And the amount of data involved is apparently huge. Think about it. A complex smell, like a really good plum, or coffee, or rain. That smell file might need data points for hundreds of different volatile compounds, plus data on how they interact, how concentrations affect perception. The sources suggest these files could be massive, way bigger than an MP3, maybe even bigger than some video files, depending on the smell's complexity and the desired resolution.
That computational load is interesting.
It's key. And understanding that data size helps explain some of the applications they're talking about. But yeah, the sheer scale of data for one smell is pretty mind-bending.
And that ability to treat smell as a transferable file, however large, that's why they're calling it the next big sensory leap. Right, moving from analog smell, actual molecules floating around, to digital transmission.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's the core of the profound leap idea. When sound and vision went digital, it wasn't just about quality improving slightly. It was about instant global reach,
Right.
infinite copying, easy storage, manipulation, scalability. Smell, until now, was pretty much stuck in the physical analog world. If you wanted to smell something, you generally need to be near it or have a physical sample. Digitization means you could, in theory, attach smell data to anything digital, store scents in the cloud, send them anywhere instantly. It literally adds a whole new layer of information to the digital world.
Okay, so let's pivot then. Let's move from the how to the so what. If this is really that big a leap, how does it actually change things? Where could this Osmo tech actually be used?
Right, the impact. The sources point to several key areas, pretty diverse ones actually. First up, and maybe the most obvious one, is virtual reality, VR and AR. Imagine putting on a headset and not just seeing and hearing a virtual beach, but actually smelling the salt spray, the seaweed, maybe some coconut sunscreen from nearby. Or in a game, smelling the gunpowder or the forest floor. It takes immersion to a whole new level.
Total immersion, yeah, that makes sense. The second area they mentioned, though, healthcare. That sounds potentially much more, well, critical.
Oh, absolutely. This could be huge for healthcare. Many diseases like Parkinson's, some cancers, diabetes, they actually cause subtle changes in body odor or the chemicals in your breath. These are VOC signatures. Often, these smell changes happen long before other symptoms are obvious. So digital smell tech could potentially revolutionize diagnostics, especially remote diagnostics. Instead of needing a patient to come in or sending physical samples off to a lab, imagine a sensor that captures the smell of a patient's breath, digitizes it, and sends that smell file across the country or the world for instant AI analysis. That's a game changer for early detection and remote care.
Wow. Okay, that is impactful. And then the third and fourth areas you mentioned, they link back to that whole computational difficulty, the huge file sizes we talked about.
Exactly. The third area mentioned is remote Arctic data centers, because processing these incredibly complex, high-fidelity smell files takes enormous computing power. You need very powerful, very efficient data centers. And locating them in cold regions like the Arctic helps massively with cooling, making them more efficient and powerful. So these places could become hubs for processing this new kind of sensory data.
Okay, that's a fascinating connection. And the fourth area?
The fourth is the whole field of sensory computing itself, basically integrating all our senses into how we interact with computers. We've got sight and sound pretty well covered digitally. Touch is getting there with haptics. Taste and smell have been the missing pieces. Osmo's breakthrough, if it holds up, provides that foundational piece for smell. It allows machines to potentially process, understand, and even generate responses based on smell data. It completes the digital sensory picture, enabling much richer human-computer interaction.
So taking all that together, It really shifts your perspective, doesn't it? It's
Yeah.
not just about smelling a faraway plum for fun. It suggests a future where the air around us, or rather, the information about what should be in the air, becomes just another form of data. The sources wrap this up by saying the air itself becomes a medium of information. The smell is the data.
Precisely. The scent profile becomes transferable, valuable information.
Okay, so just to quickly recap where we've gotten to in this deep dive, we've looked at Osmo, this company spun out from Google Research. They claim to have digitized smell, moving it from the physical world to the digital realm, using this combo of AI for perception, chemistry for analysis, and molecular printing for recreation. Scent teleportation, they call it. And the potential applications are pretty huge, making VR truly immersive, revolutionizing healthcare diagnostics, driving needs for massive data processing, and completing the picture for sensory computing.
Right. And that brings us to a final thought to leave you with. Building on that idea of massive data processing needs and the potential role of remote, powerful data centers, consider this term, polarify horizons. It's a concept that hints at fusing that remote processing power, maybe in the Arctic, with immediate local sensory output, like digital smell. If the air around us is becoming, in a sense, a carrier for digital information, what kind of really critical data could be encoded purely in a smell? Imagine receiving a specific scent as a high alert security warning, or a complex aroma that represents a detailed medical diagnostic report, or even an environmental sensor reading rendered as an olfactory signature. What information could a smell file processed remotely and rendered instantly wherever you are actually contain? Thinking about smell not just as a sensation, but as a potential high bandwidth data channel, well, that really could reshape things in the years to come.